Have you ever felt the weight of a silence that seems to speak louder than 1,000 words? I have. And it began the day my daughter got married. But before I go on, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? What city? What state? What country? I ask, because this story isn't just mine. It belongs to every mother who once found herself alone, even after giving everything she had. That day, the house was full. Laughter, flowers, music, the sweet scent of a new beginning floating in the air. I looked at her, dressed in white, and tried to memorize every detail. The sparkle in her eyes, the trembling hands, the confident steps, as if her whole life fit in that one walk down the aisle. It was beautiful. It was right. It was her dream. But deep down, a part of me already knew that for me, the celebration wouldn't end with applause. It would end with an emptiness I wasn't ready to face. When the guests left and the music faded, I came home. The flowers were still fresh on the table, my mother of the bride dress hanging on a chair, and the echo of her voice still seemed to dance through the walls. That's when the silence arrived, and it didn't come softly. It came like a cold wave, covering every corner of the house, reminding me that now there was only one plate, one cup, one chair in use. People told me, that's how it is. Mothers raise their children for the world, but no one warns you that sometimes the world takes them away and doesn't even return a phone call. No. One talks about how loud silence can be when love no longer fits inside the routine. The days that followed felt endless. I still woke up early, just like always, made coffee, folded the towel, opened the window, waiting for a sound that never came. Sometimes I'd pick up the phone just to see if her name was still there. It was, but the call never happened. It was as if time itself had turned its back on me. I tried to convince myself that she was happy, that the silence was just busyness, not absence. But a mother's heart feels what the whole world ignores. It feels when it's been forgotten. It recognizes when love changes its address. The strangest thing is, no one notices a mother's loneliness. Everyone assumes she understands, that she's used to it, that she knows how to handle it. But what they don't know is that when a daughter gets married, a part of the mother says goodbye too. And that part doesn't always come back. I started to notice her absence in the smallest things. The towel folded differently, the quiet hallway, the missing, "Mom, what's for dinner?" And it was there, between a cold coffee and an empty cup, that I realized it wasn't just my daughter who had gone. It was my role in her life that had been left behind. And you know, sometimes you don't need fights, shouting, or harsh words to lose someone. Sometimes distance is born right in the middle of an embrace. Sometimes forever only lasts until the end of the party. I'm still here, with the same love, the same care, and a longing that feels as big as the world. Sometimes I think if I could turn back time, I'd hold her hand for just one more second, just to feel that there was still space for me in that new chapter. But time doesn't go back, and silence, oh, silence has learned to live with me. It sits at my table, sleeps in the room next door, and reminds me every day that a mother's love is the only one that remains, even when no one's watching. I've always believed that raising a daughter is like planting a tree in open soil. You water it, protect it from the wind, keep the pests away, teach it to survive the winters, and one day, it grows its own branches, its own shade, its own fruit that no longer fit in your hands. I used to tell myself I was raising my daughter for the world, not for me. It was the pretty speech I repeated when the nights were short and the days were heavy, when I worked double shifts and came home exhausted, but still found the breath to listen to her secrets. Her laughter, the way she filled the house with life. That child had a light that asked for no permission. It filled the room, brightened the corners, decorated the routine. And I was proud of that. A mother's pride has no measure, and maybe that's why we so often forget to measure the distance between what we give and what comes back. She grew up surrounded by scribbled notebooks, handmade dreams, and hallway games. She'd create little plays with nameless dolls, and every scene ended with her hugging me. I became the stage, the audience, the backstage, all at once. When she fell, I blew on the pain and said it would pass. When she triumphed, I clapped as if the whole world was watching. The first time she read an essay out loud, I realized my girl had a gift for telling stories, And maybe that's why I dedicated myself to being a supporting character in her life, always ready to enter the scene when someone called Mom. If I could rewind those afternoons, hear again the sound of the E. Spoons stirring her juice, the scraping of chairs, the question, Mom, can I? I would. Not because childhood was easier, but because back then, we still fit inside each other, without fear of no longer fitting someday. Then came the teenage years, with their little separations, the bedroom door closing earlier than usual, the short texts, the "I'm fine" that left no room for more questions. I pretended not to notice, because being a mother also means learning to respect your child's secrets. I told myself it was healthy, that the world was calling, that she needed people, school, life, and I kept repeating the phrase that had guided me for years. I raised her for the world. That line saved me from guilt and carried me through school meetings, doctor's appointments, late nights waiting on the couch for the sound of a key turning, the "I'm home" that brought me peace. How many times did I warm up food at 11 at night just to see that hungry, grateful smile? How many times did I pull a blanket over her on the couch, like a quiet prayer? Every mother knows. Our faith lives in the smallest gestures. Then came college, and with it, the certainty that my pride was right, and so was my fear. She shined among books and projects, took up space, earned respect. I watched from afar, but applauded up close. Yet, between the lines of that same chapter, I noticed my name showing up less in her conversations. My advice no longer had a place, and I, who had always walked beside her, learned to walk behind, a step farther back, just so I wouldn't be in the way. I remember when she got her first internship, it was a tight hug, a photo, a message with a heart emoji, and the next day, a rush that never seemed to end. Her time was no longer my time, and that was okay. I told myself again. I raised her for the world. In the middle of that whirlwind, she met someone. The relationship began simply, and I truly tried to believe there'd still be space for me, for us, for that invisible thread of love between us. When you love, you root for them. When you're a mother, you pray. I did both. I was proud of her choices, even when I didn't fully understand them. I held on like someone clutching a satin ribbon that the wind keeps pulling away. One end in my hand, the other in hers, fluttering between dates, texts, surprises, anniversaries, and that word that kept appearing in letters, captions, gifts, future. A future for them, the present for me. I kept going, adjusting my steps, holding back. Comments that wouldn't help, offering support when I could, withdrawing when silence was the better gift, because a mother's love is also measured by how much space she knows not to take. When the wedding was announced, I cried, from joy, from pride, from shock. Pride because it meant my little girl was now a woman. Shock because I knew before anyone else that when one door opens, another quietly closes. People talked about parties, dresses, rings, ceremonies, photos, souvenirs, and I thought about silence, the bedroom, the Sunday mornings, the phone calls. I thought about the extra cup on the table, the blanket that would no longer fall on the couch, the shampoo that would last longer in the bathroom, because we wouldn't be sharing it anymore. They're thoughts that flash by like lightning, leaving a small beacon burning inside us. On her wedding day, I was the maid of honor at my own goodbye. I fixed my hair, adjusted my dress, hiding the trembling hand that held the borrowed bouquet. When I saw her walking in, so confident, so beautiful, I knew everything I had done had worked. I gave her wings, and she flew. And at the same time, something in me knew that her flight would leave me grounded for a long time. I smiled in every photo, laughed when they told me to laugh, hugged those who hugged me. But there was a tiny crack in my happiness where a cold wind slipped through, whispering a single question. When the music stops, where does the mother go? After the party, the house welcomed me back like an old friend you don't quite know how to talk to anymore. Closed windows, lined up chairs, everything too neat, too still. The tidiness bothered me. When everything is perfectly in place, it usually means someone's missing. The silence that arrived after the wedding wasn't the gentle kind that fills an ordinary afternoon. It was thick, heavy, echoing through the hallway, replaying footsteps that no longer existed. I looked at the walls, the photographs, the framed diplomas, the old notes tucked away in drawers, and held my pride close like a coat on a cold, windy day. I told myself again, I raised her for the world, then quietly added, now I have to learn to raise myself without her. Even so, I resisted. The memory of someone you love is like a long blanket. Pull it from one end, and it still covers you on the other. I pulled memories to warm the present. I remembered birthdays with simple cakes and crooked candles, her first notebook, the heavy backpack, the way she'd say, Mom, look at this, and run to show me something that was both nothing and everything at once. I remembered the first no, the first be right back, the first I don't have time. Our lives change inside those tiny phrases. Those who listen, understand. Those who are mothers, feel. I felt it, not as a sudden cut, but as a slow wear, a thread thinning until it nearly disappears. From the outside, though, all anyone sees is pride. They say I have an independent daughter, that she made it, that she's successful, that she's fine. And I nod, because it's all true. She did make it. I made it for her. But between the sentence and the reality, there's a gray zone where the heart used to live. That's the place I walk through now, alternating steps between gratitude and longing, between memory and presence, between her name glowing on my phone and the silence that follows. If someone asks how I feel, I say I'm proud, of course. But if they ask again, a little softer, I admit, I miss my girl. I miss the time when the house felt too small for our conversations, and now, ironically, it's far too big for my voice. I raised her for the world, and the world answered. The world gave her a job, a schedule, hurry, love, commitments, bills, calendars, responsibilities, goals. The world is demanding with the children we send out, and sometimes it collects its payment quietly, with fewer calls, fewer visits, less time, fewer us. I don't complain about the love she chose. It wouldn't be fair to measure someone else's happiness by the size of my emptiness. I just admit that when I encouraged her to be free, I didn't imagine that freedom would also mean becoming scenery, a background note, a memory in an old photo. And maybe the hardest lesson in all of this is learning that love grows up when it can applaud from the back row. I know that somewhere in this story, you who are listening recognize a piece of your own puzzle: mother, daughter, marriage, routine, family, silence, emotional abandonment, the kind of real story no one says out loud, wounds that don't show on the skin. Maybe your pain has another name, another date, another photo, but the feeling is the same. Someone you love started walking faster than your heart could keep up. If that's your experience, hold my hand for a few more minutes, because what comes next isn't a speech, it's a path of recognition. And if this story is helping your heart breathe a little easier, do something important for yourself right now. Subscribe to this channel. Here, every video is a refuge for those who carry longing. Every story is a mirror for those who live in silence. Every confession is a map for those seeking strength, healing, reconnection, and answers. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, not as a favor to me, but as a gift to yourself. To have a place where your pain has a name, where your voice isn't interrupted, where mothers and daughters, marriages and families, forgiveness, and new beginnings stop being taboos and become roads to healing. The next chapter of this story might bring light to the dark corners of your heart, and you won't want to miss it. After she got married, the days began to move slowly, as if the clock had forgotten how to turn. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a matter of getting used to it. The house felt colder, larger, but I thought it was simply the emptiness any mother feels when her daughter starts her own life. People kept telling me, "You'll get used to it soon," and I believed them, or tried to. The first week, I made her bed every day, even knowing no one was sleeping there anymore. It was my way of keeping her close, of pretending our routine still made sense. I folded her clothes, changed the sheets, left the pillow exactly where she liked it. And each time I entered that room, it was like opening a window to the past. Her perfume still lingered in the air, mixed with the imagined sound of her voice calling. For me, I'd sit at the edge of the bed and just stay there quietly, like someone waiting for something she knows won't come. At first, she called. The conversations were short, rushed, but they were calls. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay there?" And before I could answer, She was already talking about work, her husband, the rush of things. I listened, smiled, and pretended that minute was enough to ease the longing. I didn't want to be that mom, the one who complains, who clings. I wanted her to have freedom. So when the phone rang, I answered with a full heart, and when it didn't, I told myself she must be busy, that love doesn't need to be proven every day. But time went on, and the calls grew rare. First a day without one, then a week, then silence. I'd stare at her name in our old conversations, each message holding a tiny piece of us. Sometimes I'd open them just to reread, "Love you, Mom," and then close quickly, before the tears could fall. I waited. Waiting became my habit. I waited for a good morning, for a laughing voice note, for a picture of her lunch, anything. Waiting became my work. And when the phone buzzed, my heart raced until I saw it was just another notification. Never her name, never her voice. The small absences began to sting like invisible pinpricks. At first, I searched for excuses. She's probably tired. Maybe she forgot her phone. She must have gone to bed early. I clung to those justifications because the truth was too painful. She simply didn't think of me the same way anymore. And saying that out loud felt like naming a loss that didn't have a name yet. Sundays were the hardest. The silence tasted like memory. Before, Sundays were our day, simple cake and coffee on the porch. She'd tell me her news, her plans, laugh at her own stories. I listened closely, because every word was a little piece of life I collected. Now, Sunday is just another long day, full of empty spaces and distant TV noise I turn on just to drown the quiet. The first time she didn't call on a Sunday, I made up 1,000 excuses. She's visiting her in-laws. Maybe she doesn't have signal. She's resting. Deep down, I knew. But a mother's heart is stubborn. It believes what it must believe to keep from breaking. As the weeks went by, I realized the distance wasn't just physical. It was emotional. I no longer had a place in her life. Our conversations turned into short answers. The voice notes got briefer. I'd send a message saying, "Miss you," and she'd reply, "Me too, Mom." And that "me too" hurt me because it felt automatic, empty, just something you say. Sometimes I rehearsed a phone call. I'd pick up my cell, find her number, stare at it with my finger ready to press, and then give up. I don't want to bother her, I'd think. When she wants to, she'll call. And that's how pride started disguising itself as patience. I told myself I was giving her space, but underneath it was fear. Fear that, just by hearing her tone, I'd realize I no longer fit inside her routine. The house was the same, but the sound of her footsteps had vanished. I'd catch the wind tapping at the window and think it was her coming home. Sometimes I'd leave the porch light on, as if she could walk in at any moment. Little things became rituals of hope: the freshly pressed towel, the plate put away, the coffee made too early. It was my way of saying, "There's still a place for you here." One day the neighbor asked, "And your daughter, how is she? She must be so happy, right?" I smiled, like every mother does when she won't put her pain on display, and answered, "She is, thank God." But inside me, another voice echoed, "And me? How am I?" The truth is, her silence started taking up more space than any word. With time, the chime of new messages faded and was replaced by the sound of memory. I remembered those times she called for no reason, just to say she wanted to hear my voice. "Mom, I was thinking about you." Now the thinking was all mine, and I repeated it like a mantra. I know I'm not the only one. There are many mothers like me who wait for a call that never comes, who hide their longing behind chores, invent pretexts to talk to someone, anyone, just to feel like conversation still exists. Because when a daughter pulls away, the silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the absence of meaning. I began to understand that the pain of absence comes in waves. At first it's huge and suffocating. Later it's smaller but constant. And every time a memory arrives, it carries the same bitter taste as when it all began. Sometimes I'd see a photo of her smiling with her husband and feel happy. But right after came the question I wouldn't say out loud. Does she still think about me? I didn't want to be one of those mothers who live in the past, but how do you not revisit it if the past is the only place where she's still with me? The present is full of gaps, the future uncertain, but the past, The past still calls me Mom. The first time I realized something had truly changed was on my birthday. She always called early in the morning. That was our tradition. That year was different. I waited all day, phone on the table, volume turned up. Nothing. When night fell, I thought, she must have forgotten. And that sentence cut through me like a blade. She must have forgotten. You never imagine a child can forget her mother, until she does. I tried to justify it again. Maybe it was a busy day. Maybe she's planning a surprise. But the surprise came the next day when a simple text arrived. Mom, happy late birthday. Love you. I read it, reread it, replied sweetly. But the delay weighed more than the words. That's when I began to understand that a mother's love and a daughter's love don't disappear. They just miss each other along the way. And sometimes they take a while to find their way back. Deep down, I still believed she loved me. It's just that her love now lived on a different schedule than mine. While I waited for the phone to ring, she was running. To work, to life, to check off commitments. Her time was a rushing river, mine, a still lake. And between the river and the lake, there's a long stretch of silence no one knows how to cross. I kept trying to convince myself everything was fine, that it's normal, that things change, that this is how it goes. But the truth is, when a daughter pulls away, a mother feels like she's lost a piece of herself, and there's no medicine for that. Still, there's one thing I never lost: hope. Hope that I'll hear the phone ring and her voice say, "Hi, Mom." Hope for an unexpected hug. Hope for a reunion, even a brief one. Because a mother's love, even wounded, doesn't die. It just turns into waiting. And that's why I'm still here, sharing my story. Because I know somewhere, someone understands exactly what I'm feeling. And if you're listening now and recognize this quiet ache, stay with me. Don't go yet. What comes next is something you need to hear, because the answers you're searching for might be in the next part of our conversation. And who knows, maybe you'll discover your silence can have a voice too. I still remember the day like it was right now. It was a Saturday afternoon, sunlight slipping through the curtains, the breeze carrying that soft scent of clean laundry mixed with the perfume she used to wear. I'd baked a simple cake, just the way she liked it, and set aside a few old photos to show her. I was excited. We hadn't seen each other in weeks. I got ready carefully, chose a simple outfit, put on perfume, combed my hair, and looked in the mirror, trying to hide my nerves. Deep down, all I wanted was to see her, to feel there was still room for me in her life. I caught the bus with my heart beating fast. Every mile felt like forever. On the way, I pictured the hug, the smile, the talk we'd have. I remembered the times she waited at the door, laughing, calling me Mommy. The sound of that word comforted me. It was a warm echo in my chest, a reminder that even from a distance, she was still my girl. When I arrived, I rang the bell and waited. The gate took a while to open. When she appeared, her smile was brief, hurried, like someone trying to hide something. "Hi, Mom." Her voice sounded different, without the warmth I knew. Even so, I hugged her, tight, with that love that can't hold itself back. But her hug ended before it began. I stepped inside and felt the air turn heavy. Everything was organized, too perfect, too cold, too pretty. Every object in its place, and me, out of place. Her husband came into the living room with a distant look, like someone fulfilling an obligation. "Hi, ma'am," he said, barely lifting his eyes. I greeted him, tried to smile, but the smile didn't find a home. I sat on the couch and, for a few seconds, only the ticking clock filled the room. Conversation wouldn't flow. I talked about the weather, the garden, life, and she answered with short phrases, almost whispers. Now and then she glanced at him, as if searching for permission. I pretended not to notice, pretended everything was fine, but my heart tightened. It felt like an invisible border had been drawn between us, a wall built from awkwardness and words unsaid. At one point, I noticed her fidgeting with her hands, unsettled. She seemed to be gathering courage to say something. And then, without looking at me, she said, "Mom, don't stay today." The words hung in the air. I smiled, not understanding. "What do you mean, honey?" She took a deep breath. "It's just, we're going out in a little while, and maybe it'd be better to plan for another day." That sentence cut through me in a way I'll never forget. Mom, don't stay today. It wasn't about the day. It was about the place I no longer had. It was the quiet warning that I wasn't welcome anymore. On the outside, I kept my composure. I nodded, brushed it off, said it was fine, that I'd only come to drop off the cake and give a hug. But inside, something collapsed. The floor gave way, my chest burned, and love turned into embarrassment. It was right there, in that beautiful but cold living room, that I finally understood. My presence made her uncomfortable. I picked up my purse slowly, pretending not to feel weak. I handed her the cake and said, "It's cornbread, the kind you like." She thanked me with a quick smile, but didn't even lift the lid. Her husband was already glancing at the clock, impatient, like someone wishing time would hurry up and finish what was left to end. Before leaving, I looked around. I saw photos of her and him, trips, smiles frozen inside brand new picture frames. Not one photo of me. No trace of the life we once shared. It was as if I'd been erased from the story, replaced by a new chapter where my name no longer fit. On the bus ride home, the cake I'd baked felt heavier than ever. I stared out the window, trying not to cry. I kept telling myself everything was fine, that it was probably a misunderstanding, that she must have been tired, that her husband was just reserved, that I could come back another day. But deep down, I knew. A mother's heart knows, and mine knew in that moment that something had changed forever. When I got home, I left the lights off. I sat at the edge of the bed, hands resting on my lap, listening to the distant sound of cars outside. The world was still moving, but mine had stopped. I kept seeing her face, the way she avoided my eyes, and I wondered, where did we lose each other? When did love turn into a burden and affection into discomfort? That night, I couldn't sleep. The words, "Mom, don't stay today," kept echoing in my mind, over and over. I tried to twist their meaning, but I couldn't. It was the beginning of a silence louder than any word. The days that followed felt endless. She didn't call. I didn't either. It was as if we'd silently agreed to keep a safe distance. I held on to small hopes, a message that might come, a surprise visit, a tiny gesture, but nothing came. As the weeks passed, I realized that the memory of that visit hurt more than any absence before, because silence, at least, leaves room for doubt. But that look, that request, left me with a bitter certainty. The problem wasn't time, it was desire. Sometimes I wondered if it was my fault. Maybe I'd talked too much, meddled too often, loved too loudly. Mothers have this habit of wanting to be part of everything, and the modern world calls that overstepping. Did I love too much? Did my presence remind her of something she wanted to forget? Those questions haunted me, but I never said them out loud. I swallowed my doubts along with my morning coffee, pretending the cake was still sweet. I started noticing details I'd ignored before. She answered messages later and later. She spoke in the plural, "We're fine," never in the singular. I was no longer part of a we. It was she and he now. The distance between us was no longer measured in miles, but in silences. One afternoon, I decided to write her a letter. I took out paper and pen, the old-fashioned way, and began, "My daughter, I hope you're doing well." I wrote, erased, rewrote. I talked about missing her, about memories, about the fear of becoming a shadow in her life. But when I finished, I folded the paper and tucked it into a drawer. I didn't have the courage to send it. It was as if writing was enough, as if putting my pain into words was already a way of surviving the absence. The days dragged on, each one replaying the same scene. A quiet house, a still phone, a full heart. I started talking to myself, trying to find answers in the echo. And it's strange how pain teaches you to speak softly, to measure your words, to swallow your tears so your heart won't realize how tired it is. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see that afternoon. Her quick smile, his cold stare, the sentence that changed everything. There was no fight, no argument, just a mother, trying to fit into a space that was no longer hers. And the most painful part is that no one pushed me out. I just slowly stepped away, without anyone noticing. Anyone who's lived this will understand. Love doesn't always die in one blow. Sometimes it fades, like a candle burning down until only the wick remains. But even small, it still shines. It still hurts. It still insists on existing. And that's why I'm still here telling this story. Because I know there are mothers who have heard in one form or another, a mom, don't stay today. Mothers who felt their presence become a bother, their hug turn into a formality, their affection into a memory. If this scene touched you, write the word presence in the comments. Because maybe that's what's missing in many stories. Presence. Stay with me. Because what comes next will help you understand that sometimes a child's silence isn't forgetfulness. It's something deeper, something we must learn to see with the heart. And when I tell you what happened after that day, you'll understand why this story isn't over yet. After that day, something inside me changed. Not all at once, but slowly, like a thread unraveling. The house looked the same, but the air felt different. The cake I used to bake to sweeten the afternoons lost its flavor, and even the kitchen clock seemed to lag, as if time itself had given up on moving forward. I tried to keep living normally, but there was an invisible weight in every gesture, a shadow following me, everywhere. That's when I began to understand what a child's silence does to a mother's heart. It freezes what used to be warm, dims what used to burn, and turns longing into routine. I still waited for news. Every morning, the first thing I did was grab my phone, check for a message, a missed call, any sign at all. The phone became a window to the world, and at the same time, a mirror of my emptiness. I'd look at the screen and see her name, saved in my contacts among so many others. My daughter. 2 words that hold an entire life, but the ring never came. Her name was there, but she wasn't anymore. Sometimes I'd run my finger over her number, like gently tracing a memory. I'd imagine what she might be doing right then. Was she smiling? Was she okay? I tried to convince myself she was happy, that she didn't call because life was good. But deep down, I knew that kind of comfort was just the heart's way of not breaking. That's when I realized there's a new kind of loneliness, a digital one. It isn't made of walls, but of invisible distances. You have every way to reach someone, but no reason to. You see photos, updates, messages, but none of it is for you. It's like watching the life of someone you love without being part of it. And that kind of absence is cruel, because it's a presence that excludes you. So many times I opened the app and saw she was online. I saw she was there, typing to someone, laughing at something, living. And I, on the other side, waited for just one simple line. Hi, Mom. I didn't want a long message, just a sign, a tiny piece of attention. But it never came. And each minute without a reply stretched into eternity. I tried not to show it, not to demand anything, because I knew what she'd say. Mom, you worry too much. So I stayed quiet, and it was in that silence that I finally understood. She hadn't deleted me from her phone, but she had deleted me from her heart. My name was still there, saved out of habit, like a keepsake time. Hadn't yet found the courage to erase. That's the cruelest kind of forgetting, the one that happens while you're still alive. A mother's love is stubborn. It refuses to give up. I still sent messages from time to time. Small, simple things. Good morning, sweetheart. Come by when you can. I made your favorite dish. Messages that felt like little notes left at the door of a house no one visits anymore. And when she replied, it was short, dry, rushed. Hey, Mom, I'm busy. Or sometimes, nothing at all. And that, I'm busy, hurt more than any harsh word. Because time is a choice. And when someone doesn't have time for you, what they're really saying is, you're no longer a priority. I started realizing that my loneliness had an address, and it was saved in her phone. That device that once symbolized connection had become a daily reminder of distance. Her phone held memories, contacts, conversations, photos. I was there, but lost between the pages. A name buried among meetings, friends, notifications. Sometimes I wondered if it was like that for all mothers. If we all eventually become a saved number, a last seen, a typing that never finishes. I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure that while I speak, many mothers are looking at their phones with the same lump in their throats. So if you understand this pain, write the word heart in the comments, because that's exactly where this absence lives. I always heard that love is a bridge, but between me and my daughter, that bridge started to crumble piece by piece. First, the conversations fell, then the visits, then the gestures, and when I finally looked, the river of life had already carried the boards away. I tried to rebuild, but she never came from the other side. Maybe she didn't even notice the bridge had fallen. Maybe she thought loving me from afar was enough. Sometimes I wondered if she showed my messages to anyone, if her husband saw my name light up on the screen and rolled his eyes, if she felt embarrassed to say I was calling. Those questions followed me like a shadow, not because I doubted her love, but because I began to see that love had changed. It had taken on a new shape, a new tone, a new space, and accepting that is one of the hardest things about being a mother. There were days when my heart felt so heavy that I had to pretend everything was fine, pretend that the longing didn't hurt, that the phone lying on the table wasn't calling out to me. I went for walks, greeted the neighbors, smiled when people asked about my family. They're doing well, thank God. It was the automatic answer, but inside, the truth was different. Her absence followed me like an old perfume that refuses to leave the air. I remember one night when it rained hard. I watched the drops slide down the window and thought about calling her. I imagined she might be watching the rain too. Maybe, if I called, she'd answer. I picked up the phone, saw her name glow on the screen, and hesitated. The fear of bothering her was stronger than the need to hear her voice, and in that moment, I realized how shy love becomes when it's been hurt. Time passed, and little by little, I learned to live with the digital emptiness. I learned that sometimes grief isn't about death. It's about the living absence of someone who's still breathing. It's when you realize that the person exists, but not for you, that she's there, but distant, that she speaks, but not to you. And this isn't bitterness, it's truth. I still loved her. I still prayed for her every night. I still asked God to protect her, even if I didn't know from what. But I'll admit, love that isn't returned starts to ache. It gets heavy, it suffocates, and still we go on. Because mothers don't quit, mothers wait. I also started looking inward, trying to understand where I went wrong. Did I love too much? Did I give too little space? Did she need to pull away to find herself? These questions circle me, but maybe they'll never have answers. And that's okay. Sometimes love is exactly that. A handful of unanswered questions, a box of memories with nowhere to belong. Even now when the phone rings, I still feel that jump in my chest. I still think it might be her, but it almost never is. And when it is, her voice comes quick, efficient, like someone checking off a task. Hey, Mom, how are you? I'm fine, honey. And before silence can creep back in, she says, we'll talk later, but we don't. I hang up and sit there, holding the phone, listening to the quiet hum of the house. It's a sound only those who have loved too deeply can recognize, the sound of a mother trying to keep her dignity while her heart quietly breaks. And you know what's strange? Even after all that, love goes on. It keeps going because it's stubborn, because it's faith, because it's all I have left. I look at her name on my phone and think, maybe one day she'll call, maybe one day she'll remember. And that hope, as small as it is what keeps my heart beating. So if this story speaks to you, if you've ever felt the living absence of someone who's still here, write in the comments, I still wait. Write it so the world can see how much mothers wait, how much love insists, how much silence hurts but never wins. Stay with me, because what happened after this silence will show you that sometimes destiny speaks in ways we don't expect, and what comes next will make you see what a mother's love can truly endure. I don't remember the exact night I decided to write the letter. I think it was one of those nights when sleep just won't come, and your head fills with old voices and stubborn memories. The clock read almost midnight, and the house was wrapped in that kind of silence only mothers know. The silence full of the sounds of the past. I opened a drawer, took out a yellowed sheet of paper and a blue pen. I sat at the table, took a deep breath, and wrote at the top, my daughter. And for a moment, it felt like time turned back. Writing. Her name on the page made my hands tremble. There was so much stored inside me that I didn't know where to start. So many unsaid words, so many unspoken things, so much love suffocating under absence. I started slowly, afraid to feel too much. I wrote whatever came without thinking. My daughter, I know time has passed and life has changed. I know love changes too, its shape, its tone, its distance. But there's something that doesn't change and maybe never will. The space you occupy inside me. There are days when I try to move on, but your absence still walks through the halls of my house. I still hear your laughter echoing through the rooms. I still smell your perfume when I open the closet. It's as if a part of you still lives here, even if only in memory. I paused for a few seconds, wiping away tears that wouldn't stop falling. The pen felt heavier, as if every word cost a memory. I kept writing. I'm not writing to ask for anything, my daughter. I'm writing because the silence has become too heavy. There are things the heart can't carry alone. I need you to know, even if you never read this, what's been trapped inside me. I need to tell you that I miss us. I miss the closeness, the long conversations, the laughter that filled the house. I miss feeling like I'm still part of your life. And no, it's not out of neediness. It's out of love. The kind of love that doesn't need to be returned to exist, but still hurts when it's forgotten. As I wrote, the paper grew damp with tears. It was as if every drop carried a piece of what I never managed to say aloud. I kept going, without stopping. I know life is busy, that you have responsibilities, dreams, and 1,000 things to take care of, and I'm happy for that. But sometimes, my daughter, love also needs a pause. It needs a phone call, a simple hi. Sometimes a 1-minute message means more than 1,000 speeches, because love, when it isn't nourished, fades slowly. It doesn't die, but it turns to shadow. And I feel like our love is becoming just that, black and white. The pen slid across the paper, and what came out wasn't just sorrow, it was confession. I wasn't writing to blame her. I was writing to ease my heart. There are days when I wake up and almost call your name, the way I used to. Instinct takes over. I think about sending you a message, asking how you are, telling you I love you. But then that fear shows up, the fear of bothering you, of seeming needy, of hearing short, polite answers. So I keep it to myself. And love, poor thing, stays trapped inside my chest, begging to be let out. Writing that letter felt like bleeding onto the page. Every line was a memory I dug up again. I remembered the day she was born, the first cry, the way her eyes met mine, promising eternal love without a single word. I remembered birthdays, fevers, school days, wrinkled uniforms, the scent of cheap soap. I remembered all the nights she fell asleep in my arms and I stayed awake, just watching, just giving thanks for her existence. And then I thought, where did we lose each other? I wrote another page. My daughter, sometimes I try to understand when I stopped being your safe place. Was it when you found love somewhere else? Was it when life swept you away? Or was it when I, without noticing, started keeping too quiet? Maybe I gave you too much freedom, thinking that was love. And maybe it was. But love, when stretched too far, becomes distance. As I wrote, the sound of the wind outside seemed to echo what I felt inside. Leaves scraping across the sidewalk, like memories the years refused to leave alone. I keep photos of you in the living room, and every time I look at them, my heart fills with pride and sadness at once. Pride for the woman you've become. Sadness because I can't be part of the life I once dreamed for you. I don't want to intrude. I don't want to be a burden. I just want to exist a little inside your memories. I stopped, took a deep breath, wrote more slowly as if afraid of reaching the end. You know, my daughter, mothers feel, and I can feel that you love me, even from a distance. But love that doesn't show itself, love that stays silent, ends up hurting the one who waits. I don't want time to pass and take away the words we still need to say. I want you to know, I never blamed you. Even when the silence wounded me, I chose to believe that love was only asleep, waiting for the right moment to wake up. I closed my eyes and imagined her reading the letter, her hands holding the paper, her eyes wet, maybe a flicker of regret, but at the same time, a part of me knew she might never read it, and that was okay, because writing, in that moment, was more about me than her. It was my way of making peace with the absence, of speaking with the longing, of giving voice to everything pride had kept quiet. My daughter, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I forgive you, even if you think you owe me nothing, even if you never ask. Forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me, so I can move forward without drowning in pain. Because a mother's love doesn't know how to take revenge, it only knows how to wait. I wrote another line, then another, until one sheet of paper wasn't enough. I took another, then another. The letter became a confession, a diary, a quiet plea for reconnection. Sometimes I wonder if, when you close your eyes at night, you still remember our story, the simple life we had, the small joys. I remember everything, and maybe that's why I'm still here writing, trying to reach you through these words. Midnight had already passed, but I kept writing. My daughter, I want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me. But if at any moment, in the middle of that joy, there's room left, let me stay, just a little, even if it's only in your memories. I promise I won't ask for much, just a smile, a gesture, a word. Sometimes that's all a mother needs to breathe. When I finished, I folded the paper carefully, running my hand over it like a caress. I stared at the envelope, wondering if I should send it. I picked up the pen and wrote her name on the front, just her first name. And seeing those letters, I realized my heart still trembled just from writing them. I placed the envelope in a drawer, among other memories that time hadn't taken away, and I left it there, because I realized that letter belonged to me, not her. It was what I needed to say, even if only in silence. It was the confession that no longer fit inside my chest. And even now, sometimes I open the drawer, look at the envelope, and run my fingers over it. For a brief second, it feels like she's there, like that letter has the power to bridge what life has torn apart. If you're listening right now and you've ever written a letter you never sent, write the word wrote in the comments, because sometimes writing is the only way to keep breathing when the heart is too tired to scream. Stay with me, because what happened after that letter changed everything. Something destiny had been quietly keeping, waiting for the right moment to reveal, and you need to hear what comes next. It had been months since I'd last heard her voice, months of thick silence, the kind that sits heavy on your shoulders and steals your air. I'd gotten used to expecting nothing. Life had become predictable. Long days, empty nights, the same lukewarm coffee, the same clock ticking like a reminder that time moves forward, even when the heart doesn't. Then one ordinary afternoon, the phone rang. Her name lit up on the screen, and for a second, everything inside me froze. My heart pounded. Time stopped. I stared at the phone like it was both a miracle and a ghost. My hands shook. I took a deep breath before answering. When I heard her voice, a flood of emotions rushed through me. It was as if love, longing, hope, and fear were all fighting for space inside my chest. "Hi, Mom." 2 words, just 2, but they tore down every wall I had, built inside myself. I wanted to respond with 1,000 others, to say how much I missed her, that I was fine, that I'd waited for her every single day. But my voice failed me. All I managed to whisper was, "Hi, honey." There was a pause, a heavy silence, the kind that carries meaning. Then she said, "Mom, I need to talk to you." In that moment, my heart split in 2. One half filled with hope. Maybe it was a new beginning. Maybe she wanted to reconnect. Maybe this was the first step back. But the other half, the one already scarred, felt a cold premonition. "Of course, sweetheart. Tell me." She took a deep breath, and what came next cut through me like a cold blade. "Mom, we're going through a tough time, and we need money." I didn't answer right away. I felt the air leave my body. "We need money." The words echoed in my mind like a foreign language. It wasn't the request itself that hurt. It was the context, the timing, the long months of silence that came before that call. The pain was in. Knowing that after all that time, the first thing she said to me was, "We need." My instinct as a mother kicked in instantly. I wanted to say yes, to fix it, to protect. That's what love does. It reacts. But alongside that impulse came another feeling, a mix of hurt and clarity. I realized that this wasn't a reunion. It was a transaction. She started explaining. She said her husband had lost his job, that the bills were piling up, the rent was late, the house needed repairs. She spoke fast, nervous, trying to justify the request, and I listened, quietly. Every word she said broke me a little more, not because of what she was asking, but because I realized I was only remembered when their life began to fall apart. Inside, I wanted to scream, "And where were you when my life went empty? Where were you when the silence swallowed me whole?" But I said nothing. I stayed silent, because mothers stay silent. Mothers swallow. Mothers hide. After a few seconds, I answered softly, "Of course. Honey, of course I'll help." The words came out gentle, but my heart came out bruised. I walked over to the drawer where I keep my savings, the little that's left from years of work and sacrifice, money I'd set aside for medicine, for emergencies, for an uncertain future. I took out the envelope, looked at it, and felt a mix of pain and love. I thought, if this money can ease her pain, then it's worth it. But deep down, I knew what she needed wasn't money. It was presence, and that sadly, she no longer asked for. The next day, I made the transfer. I texted her to say it was done. I waited for a thanks, Mom. I waited for a heart emoji, a call, some kind of warmth. But what came instead was a short, polite message. We got it. Thanks so much. I'll call you later. The call never came. That sentence, we need money, kept echoing in my head for days. I tried not to think about it, but it came back over and over, like a sad song you can't turn off. I replayed the whole scene, the ring, the hope, the pause, the request, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized mother's love truly is the kind that bleeds while smiling. I don't regret helping. I never could. What hurt was realizing that to her, I had become this, a resource, a solution, a bank account. Love had turned into usefulness, and that truth weighs heavier than any bill. In the weeks that followed, I found myself staring at my phone with that same old reflex, hoping for some news. Nothing. No message, no call. It was as if the money had paid off, along with the bills, the debt of contact. As if by helping, I had closed the chapter she needed from me. I caught myself thinking about how many mothers live this. How many are remembered only when things fall apart, when life hits their children hard? How many go months without hearing I love you, only to get a mom, can you help me, instead? It's a wound no one talks about, but it cuts deep. It's the wound of affection disguised as convenience. And it hurts even more because it comes from the ones we love most. I spent days trying to convince myself that she truly needed it, that it wasn't selfishness, it was desperation, that she still loved me, she just didn't know how to show it. But part of me knew that real love, when it's true, comes before the request, not after. During that time, I learned what it means to love without return. It's a love that gives, even knowing it might get hurt. A love that offers, not because it expects something back, but because giving has become its nature. And that's how many mothers live, with hearts full of cracks, yet still beating love. Some nights, I dreamed of her as a little girl again, running to me, hugging my legs, saying, "Mommy, help me tie my shoes." I'd wake up with tears in my eyes, realizing that, in real life, she still asked for help, just without the hug, without the look, without the love, only with numbers. Time went on, and a mother's pride began to blend with a woman's pain. Because as unconditional as a mother's love is, it still feels, it still tires, it still hurts. And when manipulation repeats itself, it leaves marks that can't be seen but never fade. Still, I kept praying for her. I kept asking God to guide her, to give her what I couldn't anymore. Because a mother's love doesn't know how to quit. And deep down, even wounded, I still hoped she'd call again. Not to ask, but to remember. To say something simple like, "Mom, I was thinking about you." If you've ever lived something like this, if you've ever felt that quiet pain of being remembered only when you're needed, write in the comments. I know what that's like. Because somehow, sharing the pain makes it hurt a little less. And if you're still here with me, stay a little longer. What comes next is the turning point of this story, something that completely changed the way this mother, and maybe you, understands love, forgiveness, and what it means to keep going even when your heart says it can't anymore. After that call for help, after that bittersweet mix of hope and disappointment, the silence came back to live with me. But this time, it felt different, colder, heavier, a silence that didn't just fill the rooms of the house, but the corners of my soul. And in that emptiness, something began to stir inside me. A memory, an echo from the past I'd long buried, started to rise. And that's when I realized, before being a mother, I was also a daughter. The memory came softly, like someone knocking on your door in the middle of the night. I was washing dishes when I suddenly heard my own mother's voice in my mind, the voice I hadn't heard in years, maybe decades, firm, calm, with that tone of a woman who faced life head-on without time to complain. And for a moment, I saw myself in her place. I must have been about my daughter's age when I began to pull away from my mother. I remember it so clearly. Back then, I thought she was dramatic, too sensitive, too emotional, that she didn't understand my world. I told myself I needed space, freedom, independence, that I didn't want anyone checking on me, calling to see if I got home safe. I thought her love was overbearing, and little by little, I drifted away. The distance began just like it did now. A call unanswered, a visit postponed, a harmless excuse. I remember saying, "I'll stop by later, Mom." And later turned into weeks, months, almost never. She used to wait for me with coffee ready, and I'd make up reasons not to go. Sometimes I came home late, tired, and saw her missed calls. And without much thought, I'd say to myself, "I'll call tomorrow." But tomorrow never came. And now, all these years later, I see how life has a cruel way of teaching the lessons we refused to learn when it mattered. What my mother felt back then, I feel it now. My daughter's absence is the mirror of the one I once caused. I remember one day in particular. It was her birthday. Of course I knew. But work was busy, my marriage too, and I told myself I'd call later. When I finally did, it was already night. She answered with a tired voice, trying to hide the sadness. "Hi, sweetheart. I thought you'd forgotten." I laughed. "Oh, Mom, of course not. I'm just a little late," she said. "That's okay. I'm used to it." And now, every time I remember that sentence, it feels like the world spins back to that moment, and I realize that destiny never forgets. For many years, I didn't understand my mother's eyes, that silent look filled with something I couldn't name. Today, I do. It was the same look I gave my daughter the day she said, "Mom, don't come today." It was the look of someone who realizes that love is still alive, but no longer has a place to live. I thought about her a lot in the weeks that followed. I started remembering the simple things, the ones that only make sense once they're gone. The way she called me to eat, the way she tucked in the sheets, her short, precise words. Back then, I thought she was being overbearing. Now I understand, it was care. I also remembered the times she wanted to talk, and I was too busy. She'd try to start a conversation, tell old stories, and there I was, phone in hand, half listening. "Mom, I've heard that story 1,000 times. How many times did I say that to her? How many times has my daughter said the same to me?" It's frightening how life repeats itself, how pain passes down without us even noticing. The past started visiting me more often. I dreamed about her. I dreamed I was back in the old house, the cold floor, the smell of soap, the aluminum pot shining on the stove. And she was there, sitting with her tired smile and calloused hands, saying, "Sweetheart, eat something." I'd wake up with tears in my eyes, my throat tight. It was as if my mother wanted to remind me that the time I wasted in silence with her was now coming back to charge its price. One day, I sat on the couch and looked at an old picture. Me, young, beside her, the wide smile, her arm around my shoulder. And I realized that back then, I had no idea that hug would someday end. We always think there will be time, that we can postpone love, that there will always be a later. But later isn't guaranteed. And by the time we notice the phone doesn't ring anymore, her plate at the table is empty, and all that's left are memories that hurt and teach. That was when I finally understood what my mother felt when I started pulling away. I understood her fear of losing me to the world. I understood how hard she tried to hold the distance back with phone calls and advice, and I realized, with a lump in my throat, that the cycle had repeated itself. What I once did to her, life was now doing to me through my daughter. It's strange how we only learn what love truly is when it's already too late. I, who so many times judged my mother for feeling too much, now find myself being judged for the same thing. I, who once thought she needed to move on, now understand that there's nowhere to go when your heart stays behind. The memory of my mother made me realize how a mother's love is a living inheritance, a chain that stretches from generation to generation, trying to stay whole, breaking a link here and there. And every time a mother is forgotten, that chain weakens a little more. I wish I could ask her forgiveness. I wish I could tell her that now I understand, that now I know what it's like to wait for a call that never comes, that now I know what it's like to talk to the void, that now I know what it's like to want to hug someone who will never come back. Sometimes I find myself talking to her out loud. I tell her about my life, my daughter, my pain, my hopes, and deep down, I feel she listens, that she's there, invisible, caring for me the same way she always did. Maybe that's what love does. It finds ways to stay, even when everything else fades away. Those memories made me realize that no matter how much time changes things, emotions remain the same. My mother loved the way I love. She suffered the way I suffer. She waited the way I wait. And maybe the only difference is that now I understand the cost of not having listened in time. I started writing about her in a notebook, trying to put on paper what my heart could no longer hold alone. I wrote, "Mom, now I understand." Just 3 words, but they carried the weight of a lifetime. It was the sentence I should have said while she was still here. And as I wrote it, something struck me that made me tremble. One day, my daughter might write the same thing to me. That thought froze me, because if pain repeats, then love can repeat too. What I lived with my mother is now repeating with my daughter, and maybe, if I'm strong enough to break this cycle, she won't have to feel the same someday. Maybe that's why I'm still here, telling this story, to give voice to what so many mothers live in silence, and to help so many daughters understand before time makes them pay the price. So, if you're listening to me now, if this memory brought someone to your mind, a mother, a daughter, a grandmother, write the word "I understand" in the comments, because recognizing it is the first step toward healing. I kept thinking about how life is made of mirrors. We think we're living something new, but deep down, we're just repeating it. And maybe by telling this story, I'm trying to understand the reflection, trying to speak to the girl I once was, the woman I became, and the mother I still am. And while the past calls to me, the present still waits, because my story with my daughter isn't over yet, and what comes next is the moment when destiny begins to speak in a way neither of us ever expected. After everything that happened, the request for help, the memory of my mother, the nights when longing turned into prayer, came a new kind of silence. Not the silence of abandonment, nor the silence that suffocates, but a different silence. A silence I chose. A silence that doesn't scream, but teaches. For the first time in a long time, I decided not to respond. It wasn't easy, because a mother's instinct is to react, to help, to fix. We learn early on to run when our child calls, even when our body is tired and our heart is in pieces. But that time, I felt something inside me say, "Wait," and I listened, not because I wanted to hurt her or get even, but because for the first time, I realized my silence could also be a form of love. When she texted me a few days later, asking for something again, a favor, advice, support, I read it, took a deep breath, and set the phone down. The sound of the notification still echoed inside me, but I didn't answer. I looked at her name glowing on the screen and thought about how many times I'd rushed to respond before even thinking of myself, how many times I'd swallowed pride, swallowed tears, swallowed everything, just to not leave her waiting. And that afternoon, for the first time, I chose myself. Silence is a language only the heart understands. It speaks without words, teaches without shouting, heals without promising. I didn't respond, but inside me a storm raged. Part of me wanted to write, "Honey, I'm here, like I've always been." The other part, tired, whispered, "Not this time." And I realized that love also needs pauses, that loving without stopping is a slow way of losing yourself. In the days that followed, silence kept me company. It was a new silence, filled with strength, but also with fear. Fear that she would misunderstand, that she would think I'd become cold. But over time, I realized that coldness is the opposite of love. Silence is not. Silence is love that has matured. I remember sitting at the table all night, staring at my phone in the dark. The room was quiet except for the ticking clock. Each tick felt like a question. "Are you going to answer?" I didn't. And with every passing second, I felt that my silence was speaking for me. It said, "I'm tired of giving everything of myself while you only come to me when you need something." It said, "I love you, but now I need to love myself too." People think silence is empty, but when it comes after so much giving, silence is full of meaning. I was learning, for the first time, that a mother's love doesn't have to mean surrender, that a mother's love can also have limits, not to punish, but to preserve itself. I kept remembering how many times my own mother tried to teach me that, and I just didn't want to. Listen, she used to say, "Daughter, too much love, when not taken care of, turns into a wound." Back then, I didn't understand. Today, I do. I understand that silence can be a bitter medicine, but a necessary one. The following days felt different. She sent another message, shorter this time. "Are you okay, Mom?" And I smiled, because that simple phrase was more sincere than all the requests that came before. There was concern. There was a trace of affection. But still, I didn't reply right. Away. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and let my heart decide when it was time. While I waited, I remembered all the times my love had been given without pause, the sleepless nights, the advice ignored, the favors asked and forgotten. And in that silence, I realized that my whole life had been a yes disguised as love, a yes to everything, a yes to her, to pain, to emptiness. And this time, I needed to say no, even if in silence. I started taking care of myself. Small things, simple, but new. I put flowers on the table, went out for walks, started listening to music again. It had been so long since I'd done anything just for me that for a few days, I even felt guilty. It's funny how mothers feel guilty even for breathing without thinking of their children. But that silence gave me a kind of peace I didn't even know existed. The love I had for her hadn't lessened. It had just changed shape. I still prayed for her every night. I still asked God to take care of my daughter, to protect her, to help her understand the value of presence before time had to do it for me. And while I prayed, I realized something. Sometimes love speaks loudest when it chooses to stay quiet. One day that week, the phone rang. It was her. I looked at the screen, took a deep breath, and let it ring. The sound echoed through the whole house, and when it stopped, the silence returned. But this time, it didn't hurt. I knew my silence wasn't rejection. It was protection. It was a quiet request for her to feel what it's like to wait, to understand that love must be nurtured from both sides, not just one. Some might call that pride, but it wasn't. Pride is when we stay silent to prove a point. I stayed silent to heal. I stayed silent to avoid saying something my wounded heart might later regret. I stayed silent because I had learned that not every answer needs to be spoken. Some are better answered by time. And during that time, I discovered something beautiful. Silence is the mirror of maturity. It's where we listen to ourselves, where we find ourselves, where we rebuild. I had spent years talking too much, trying to fill every empty space with words. But in that phase, I realized that emptiness can also be sacred, because it's in the empty spaces that we rebuild who we are. The days began to feel lighter. She didn't insist. Maybe she was surprised. Maybe she reflected. I don't know. But I do know that, for the first time, I felt at peace with my role, that the love I had for her was strong enough not to need proving. And if you're listening to me now, if you've ever had to choose silence to protect yourself, write the word peace in the comments. Because that's exactly what peace is. It's not the absence of love. It's love in its mature form. It's love that no longer has to beg to be seen. I realized that silence is the space between pain and forgiveness. It's the moment when the heart learns to breathe again. I didn't know what would come next. If she would come back, if she would understand, if destiny still held a reconciliation. But I knew my silence wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. And as contradictory as it sounds, it was through silence that I finally heard everything I needed to hear from myself. The love I still felt, the hurt I'd been hiding, the strength I didn't know I had. Silence gave all that back to me. There was still much to be said, much to be lived. And even without an answer, I knew life hadn't finished its lesson yet. Because destiny has a curious way of stitching together what time has torn apart. And sometimes it's when we stop insisting that love finds a new way to return. The days had grown long. I no longer expected anything. No calls, no visits, no news. I had made peace with silence, learned to live with it. It had become almost a constant presence, a quiet companion that no longer frightened me. I kept to my small, calm routine. Morning coffee, the window open to let the sun in, the plants I cared for with more affection than ever. I spoke to God every night, but no longer asked for anything. I only thanked him for giving me the strength to keep going. Then, one cloudy afternoon, the unexpected happened. I was in the kitchen slicing fruit when I heard the sound of the gate opening. That sound time never erases, the creak that the heart recognizes even after years. My whole body froze. The knife hovered mid-air, and before I could think, I heard her voice. Mom, just that. One word, small but carrying the weight of everything left unsaid. I didn't turn around right away. The fear of hoping held me still. How many times had I imagined that moment? How many times had I dreamed of hearing her call me like that again, out of nowhere, like before? I took a deep breath and slowly turned. She was standing at the door, her hair loosely tied, her eyes downcast, her hands trembling. I looked at her in silence, as if my eyes needed to confirm she was real. And she was. She was right there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt heavy, time suspended. The silence between us wasn't the same as before. It was a silence full of things waiting to be said, full of memories that still hurt. And yet, there was tenderness. She took a step. I felt the ground shift. I wanted to run to her, to hold her, to breathe her in, but something inside me said, wait. My heart wanted to burst, but my reason whispered, be still. I let her come closer, slowly. She stopped just a few steps away, and for the first time in a long time, our eyes met. Her gaze said everything words couldn't. It spoke of regret, longing, guilt, love. It was the look of a daughter who had finally understood what time had tried to teach. I didn't need to hear an apology. I saw it in her eyes. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Mom, She stopped. The words stuck in her throat, too heavy to come out. I moved a little closer, and what I felt in that moment is something that can't really be explained. It wasn't anger, or sadness, or relief. It was all of it at once. It was love finding its place again inside my chest. She took a deep breath, looked at me, and said, I'm sorry. That was all. And it was enough. That word, said through a trembling voice, untied years of silence. I didn't cry loudly. I just let the tears fall quietly. She cried too, softly, as if ashamed of her own pain. And there, in that simple kitchen, mother and daughter found each other again. There was no dramatic embrace, no grand gesture, just presence. She sat in one chair, I in another. We stayed that way for a while, looking at each other, trying to fill the space with what was left. The wind came through the window, a quiet witness to a reunion that destiny had delayed, but never denied. She started to talk. She told me she had thought about me every day, but didn't know how to come back. That shame had held her back, that pride had silenced her, that life had swallowed her up and time had gone too fast. She said she remembered my words, my voice, my prayers. She said she missed home. I heard everything in silence, not to judge, but to let my heart understand. Every sentence she spoke was a stitch, mending the torn fabric of our story. In her, I saw the girl I raised, and at the same time, the woman life had shaped, and I realized that no matter how far she had gone, the road back had always been open. At one point, she held my hand. Her hands were cold, trembling, and without thinking, I squeezed back. It was instinct. The body remembered what the mind had forgotten. That touch brought everything back. The birth, the sleepless nights, the childhood hugs, the laughter, the prayers. A mother and daughter's touch is an ancient language that you don't forget. She began to cry harder and said, Mom, I know I was wrong. I know I left you alone, but I thought about you so much. So many times I picked up the phone and didn't have the courage to call. And I simply replied, I know, sweetheart. I didn't say everything was fine because there were still wounds, but I didn't say I was hurt either. Sometimes true love doesn't pick sides. It just welcomes. Time passed there without us noticing. The afternoon light turned golden, the room filled with a gentle warmth, and her presence seemed to fill every corner the silence had occupied for so long. She looked around and smiled when she saw nothing had changed. You still have the crochet tablecloth I made. I smiled back. Of course, some things we don't throw away, and I realized it wasn't just about a tablecloth. It was about us. Some things, Even when they're bruised, even when they've been forgotten, we don't throw away. She stayed a little longer. We talked about small things, about the everyday, as if we were trying to hide the size of what was happening. But her eyes told me more than any conversation. I saw the girl who left and was now trying, little by little, to come home. When she stood up to leave, I stopped at the door. She hugged me, a shy, restrained hug, but real, and I felt her heart racing like a child who has just asked for forgiveness. I hugged her back, not with strength, just with love. "I'll come back, Mom. I promise." The sentence sounded simple, but it carried everything I needed to hear. I didn't want a grand reply. I just nodded and said, "Okay, honey." She left, and I stayed there in the doorway, watching her go. I didn't cry this time, because for the first time in a long time, what remained inside me wasn't emptiness, it was hope. I didn't know if she would truly return, if time would allow us to rebuild what silence had taken. But that day, something inside me was reborn. It was as if life had given back a piece I thought I'd lost forever. Later, when night fell and the sky filled with stars, I sat on the porch, looked up, and gave thanks in silence. I thanked her for coming back, not to ask, not to justify, but to feel, because sometimes that's all we need, someone who returns without a reason, simply because they want to. And if you're listening to me now and believe that love can still return, write in the comments, "She came back." Because when we believe, destiny finds a way. Sometimes it takes time, but it finds it. And that's how, after so long, destiny blew a different wind over my life. A wind that brought back not only my daughter, but also the woman I had let fall asleep inside me. And what happened after that reunion was something neither time, nor pain, nor silence could have predicted. There comes a moment in life when the heart learns to rest. After feeling so much, waiting so much, crying so much in silence, there comes a time when the soul simply understands that true love isn't measured by presence, nor erased by distance. It took me a long time to understand this, years of trying to hold on to what wanted to fly, trying to fix what only time could heal. But today, looking back, I see that a mother's love is made of giving and also of letting go. I didn't lose her. I simply let her fly. Those words follow me like a prayer. They remind me that love doesn't have to be close to keep existing. My daughter walks her path, and I walk mine. And somehow our stories remain intertwined, even without touching all the time. Because soul ties don't break, they only change form. It took me a while to understand that being a mother isn't about holding. It's about allowing. It's planting and trusting. It's teaching the flight, even knowing the nest will one day be empty. At first, it hurt like my chest was opening. But today, when I think of her, what I feel isn't absence, it's gratitude. Gratitude for loving her with everything I am. Gratitude for being chosen to be a shelter, even if only for a while. Gratitude even for the pain, because it taught me to love with awareness, not fear. I learned that silence isn't an enemy. It's a mirror for the soul. It was in silence that I found the answers no words could give. It was there that I heard God whisper softly, "You did your best." And maybe that's the sentence every mother needs to hear at some point, because we spend our whole lives thinking we could have done more, given more, loved more. But sometimes what love asks for isn't more. It's less. It's space. It's pause. It's faith. When I look at the time that has passed, I see purpose in it all. Absences taught me about presence. Disappointments taught me about forgiveness. Goodbyes taught me about starting over. Every tear fell to water a part of my heart that still needed to bloom. And today, seeing those flowers grow, I understand that true love is the kind that continues even after the pain. My daughter lives her life, and I live mine with calm. Sometimes she calls, sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes my heart tightens, but it no longer hurts. I pray for her every night, and when her name leaves my lips, there's no weight anymore, only light, because I learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's freedom. And forgiving doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It means I won't let the hurt lead me anymore. I also understood there's a kind of love that transcends time and flesh, a love that lives somewhere else, in the invisible, in what we don't see but feel. A mother's love lives in that place. It doesn't fade, It doesn't unravel. It doesn't die. It transforms. It rises. It learns to exist even when the other person isn't ready to receive it. Today, when I look at my story, I don't see losses. I see paths. Paths that made me more human, more whole. I look in the mirror and recognize every wrinkle as a memory, every line as a mark of the woman who endured. And I'm proud, because loving didn't destroy me. It built me. I learned that unconditional love doesn't mean accepting everything. It means loving while understanding the other is free. It means respecting a child's journey without erasing yourself. It means knowing that sometimes distance is also a kind of care. Because there are moments when love suffocates, and true love learns to let go. I look up at the sky and think of my mother, my daughter, and all the women who came before me. I think about how much we quietly carry the world inside our chests, how much we love, give, reinvent ourselves, and still stand. And I realize there's something sacred about being a mother. It's a ministry of the soul. It's living proof that love is the most powerful force there is. There are days when the wind brings back memories. I close my eyes, and it's as if she's still little, running through the house, calling for me. In those moments, I smile, not with sadness, but with tenderness, because I've understood that love isn't measured by how often we call or by the hugs that we're missing. Love is measured by what remains, even when everything else changes. What stays after everything is peace, a sweet, mature peace that doesn't deny pain, but transforms it. A peace that comes from understanding that life goes on and each of us has to find our own way. I found mine in faith, in silence, and in gratitude. I don't want her to come back out of need anymore. I want her to come back out of love. I want her to look back one day and feel proud of who we were, even with the flaws, even with the distance. Because a mother's love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true. Today, when I lay down to sleep, I tell myself, you didn't lose, you loved, and that's enough. Because in the end, love is what gives life its meaning. Everything else passes. What remains is what the soul keeps. And that's what the matriarch secrets taught me, that true power lives in the heart that loves and sets free, that being a mother is more than caring. It's evolving, growing, forgiving, letting go, and still remaining in love. Life moves in cycles. Some end, others begin. But each one brings a lesson. And sometimes the greatest miracle isn't in what returns. It's in what we finally learn to let go of in peace. Now take a deep breath with me. Think of the person who taught you what love is. Maybe your mother, maybe yourself. And hold that inside you. Because that's the inheritance no absence can steal. And before you leave, I want to tell you something important. The next video appearing on your screen is one of the deepest I've ever shared. It's a different story, but it carries the same truth, the same strength, the same heart. Watch it now. It will touch you in a way you might not expect, and I'm sure it will leave you in silence. The good kind, the kind that heals, the kind that speaks to the soul.